So this is my latest little stove. I'm calling this a Yukon stove because it's a very kind of old school design from Yukon territories. People would build little stoves like this to heat their cabins and cook on and stuff like that. And I've incorporated a lot of those features and some features from some of the other stoves and ovens that I've built that I've found that have worked. Just a quick overview. It's got, you know, no hinges, no nonsense. This is all made with hand tools, pliers, chisel, tin snips, hammer, screwdriver, drill, and a vise, and that's it. And it all fits together. This is the where you put the wood in. That's the stoke hole, and then I've got a stoke hole cover that's got a built-in draft mechanism, and you can see it's just a tin can, but all the way open it'll burn like crazy. And then it's got a built-in oven up here, and I'm going to show the build of this, but I thought I'd kind of show the first firing. I don't know if it's going to work, so if this fails you can all laugh. So if this works anything like my other stoves, basically all I have to do is take a few pieces of paper and twist them up. I'm going to put these in there and a few sticks. First time I fire up a stove, I like to go kind of easy, just a few sticks just to get it used to heat going through it and things like this. So I'm not going to build like some raging fire in here, but I am going to fire it up and see if it drafts the way I want it to and things like that. If it doesn't work the way I want it to, then I'm going to have to change a couple things, but I think it's going to work, so we'll give it a shot here. Just going to put some smaller sticks in here. The firebox is 18 inches deep, so I don't have to break stuff up too much. Just a couple. I wanted to be able to fit, you know, like chunks, decent sized chunks of wood in there, so that I'm not constantly having to get up and stoke the fire and things like that. One thing I am going to say is that this is an all steel construction, and this is not a backpacker's model. This is something that you take to like a semi-permanent shelter, like maybe you've built something out in the woods, or you got a little cabin. This will heat your cabin just fine. And a stove fairly similar to this, although this is the only one I've ever seen that's got a built-in oven, but stoves fairly similar to this have been used forever in the Yukon to heat. And so without further ado, let's try this. Yeah, my other two stoves, and I'll put some links up to those videos, were more or less just tests to see if I could get this one to work. And just to prove concept. Well, it is drafting. I'll show that. I'm going to put this back on and I'm going to run it basically wide open. And that should help suck air in a little bit more efficiently. And it's smoking, getting warm. Let's see how it does here. I'm going to take a little break. It started really easy. It's burning really well. It's not smoking around the stove anywhere. I put an oven thermometer in my little oven there, and I'll check that later. But then you can see it's drafting just fine. I mean, there's smoke coming out of there. It's being burnt really efficiently, so you're not seeing like huge amounts of smoke. So the stove so far is working as designed. I'm going to see, just with that little bit of wood we put in there, how hot our oven was able to get. I'm going to show you a feature here real quick. And this is that draft can. And the reason you want to be able to control the amount of air getting in is if you want to run it wide open, so take the can all the way out, a lot of air is going to go in, and I can actually see it being sucked back in there because of the way the flow of the smoke goes. That'd be like to start it. It's going to push a lot of air in there, and it's going to burn up wood really quickly, and it's going to generate heat really quickly. So if you're going to cook, you'd want this out. If you're just looking to heat and kind of minimize the amount of trips out to the wood pile and things like that, you put the can in. You can close it all the way down. I mean, you can close it all the way down, and your temperature will go down. You can pull it out a little bit, your temperature will go up. But you can really control the temperature of the stove and your cooking surface just by manipulating that little draft can, and it's going to loosen up here eventually. It's a little stiff. I could make a couple cuts in the can and solve that, but so far it's fine. One nice thing about having no hinges is I don't have to screw with any of that. When it heats up, the hinge isn't going to pinch. You know, I don't have to touch a hot door. This is basically, this stokehole comes right off without any difficulty at all and goes right back on, and it's not hot. I mean, you can see I'm touching it with bare hands just fine, and it airtight, does everything you want it to. So we'll check the oven temperature here in a minute and see how we're doing. But so far our stove is, ooh, that's hot. I mean, easily could cook on that, no problem. So far everything's working great, and we'll check the oven temp in just a minute. So I just have being that this is the first burn, I'm not going too crazy putting wood in there, just a few sticks and stuff, and this is plenty hot. Be interesting to see how hot our oven was able to get here. Look in there. Oh yeah, we're at 300 degrees. Let's see if I can show you that. Yeah, it's 350 degrees. Just with a few sticks in there. That's perfect. That's baking right there. So just to explain briefly why this stove works and why I'm able to have an oven there, it looks like the smoke from the chimney goes through the oven. It doesn't. This is a box inside of a box, and I designed the shape and size of that box to fit one of my bread pans, because I can bake anything I need to in one of those bread pans. But the reason this stove works, and the reason I'm able to have an oven and a cooktop and get it plenty hot with minimal wood, is that the fire is down in this area, and then I've got a baffle right here. So you got the main firebox, and then there's a steel wall going from here all the way to about here. So the smoke and fire is generated back here, and in order to get out the chimney, it has to go forward, up towards the front of the stove, under that baffle, then up through there. And when it gets up into here, in order to get out the chimney, it has to split and go around the oven. So it has to heat the oven in order to get out, and it's functioning flawlessly. I think I really nailed the dimensions and everything on this. But and by making the smoke and heat go through all those different paths to escape, it's much more efficient. Because if I just built a fire here on the ground, all the heat would go up and it'd warm us a little bit, but this way it uses a lot more of that heat, whether it be for a cooking surface, for the oven. The other thing is that when this burns, if you just burn like a stick like this, the smoke that it generates is still going to have stuff in it that's combustible and usable. So if you if you burn it and it just goes straight up, then you're not using all of the chemicals that are in the wood. But if you make the smoke pass back over the fire and go around and monkey around a bit, basically you can use more of the wood. And so what I've found on my two previous models is that what you have left is basically just powder. I mean, there's nothing left of the wood after you burn it this way. I mean, it's just gone. You get very fine ashes with hardly anything. And it burns for a long time, especially if you close this down even more than I have it. It'll burn for quite a while and use all of that wood, and just less monkeying around with wood equals more time doing other stuff, and the less wood I have to gather, the less calories I'm burning gathering that wood. So you want a nice efficient stove. One last thing, I've shown how to build each of these little things. Like I've shown how to build the stove, the stokehole, the stokehole collar, stokehole cover collar, and the draft can. I've shown how to build all of these little elements in other videos. So the build video on this is not nearly as detailed as some of the others, but you can, if you have a question about how to build a particular element, you can always just go back and find it in one of my other videos. So that's it. So welcome to take 3 on my wood burning stove. I'm making a new one that's actually going to use some of the old things that I figured out in my other stove models. It's going to be full size this time, able to burn full size wood. And I've taken some 12 by 18 sheets of 22 gauge steel, and I made the sides and top and bottom for it. These are going to be the sides. I basically measured 1 inch and went all the way along front to back on both of them, and scored it with a cold chisel, dink, 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 all the way along there, and then used a vise to bend things up. So those are the sides. So we'll have 10-inch tall sides. And then the top and bottom, I went and did the same thing, only a half inch. So we're going to have 11-inch wide top and 18 inches long. And so that's the side, top, and bottom. On my previous models, I spent a lot of time kind of crimping things together, and I just have found that this heavier steel for the firebox, I have a hard time doing that, so I'm just going to rivet this stuff together. I'll start by riveting the bottom and then the sides on, and then I'll build the back and the baffle and all that stuff, and we'll go from there. What I've done here is I've made the baffle out of another 12 by 18 sheet of 22 gauge steel, and in order to match the inside diameter a little better, I bent up 5/8 inch on one side and a 1/2 inch on the other, and then I bent a quarter, actually 1.25 inches down. Let me make sure that's right. Yeah, 1.25 inches down here, so that there'll be 1.25 inches clearance between the top of the stove and 1.25 inches clearance at the front for smoke to route around to go out our chimney. So here's what this will look like assembled. I haven't put the top on yet, just so you can see. There's a baffle here. This is the firebox. There'll be a door here, and then the fire goes here. Smoke comes around, has to come around the baffle to exit the chimney, which will be at the back. So we'll more efficiently use the gases and all that are generated by combustion of the wood. This is the top of the stove. I've centered and cut a 3-inch hole for smoke to go out towards the back. There's going to be an 8-inch wide oven built at the back, and the smoke will have to go around the oven to go out, so that's how I'll heat the oven. And then there's a a cooking surface at the front of the stove that will be adequate for any kind of a pot you're going to put on there. Okay, so now I'm making the oven part of the stove, and I've made a 7 by 7 inch square here that's an 11 inches long, so 7 by 7 by 11, and then I've flared out the bottom so that I can attach it, and I'll show you why. And then this is going to be the actual oven box, and I've got a little thing again. This is actually 8 by 8 because the box for the oven is going to be 8 by 8, and this is the insert for the oven, and this will be 7 by 7. So I will explain that eventually, but now I have to put the little, I don't know, I guess you'd call it a cowling that I made for this. It fits over here. I have to put that on and keep plugging away here, but I'm building the oven now. This is going to be the oven portion of my little wood burning stove, and it's basically, the oven is a 7 by 7 inch box that's as wide as the stove is, and I have the front of it sitting out a little bit further than the frame, so that I can just put a lid on and off of there, and I'll show how to make that later. But basically, it's a 7 by 7 inch box enclosed in an 8 by 8 inch box, and I have to put a top on this and then make a little stovepipe collar so that I can put a stovepipe on top, and this will be more or less airtight, and smoke will have to flow around the oven and heat it and then out through the stovepipe. And you can see where it'll sit. I cut a 3-inch hole towards the back of my finished stove, so the smoke has to go like this from the back of the oven towards the front around this baffle, heat up this stovetop surface for cooking, and then it'll come out this hole. And after it comes out the hole, it has to circulate around my little oven insert. So it has to circulate around this in order to get out the smokestack. So that's how I'll make the oven. So I'm basically just making really good use of all the heat that I'm trying to, that I'll produce with my wood. So I'll have a baking and a cooking surface. And I made this 8 inches wide, and this cooking surface will fit any 10-inch fry pan or any kind of a pot you want to put on there. So here's the completed oven setup. It's pretty much airtight. There was a little gap along the bottom, and I just put a little reinforcing strip there. Shouldn't be a big deal. I don't think I mentioned it. The oven enclosure here and the oven itself are made with 26 gauge steel, and all of the stove parts so far have been made of 22 gauge steel, because this is where most of the heat is going to go, and this was just a little bit easier to bend and work with. As you can see, everything is riveted together nice and solid, so I'm going to get busy building the rest of the stove. So now I'm making the stokehole collar for my stove, and the stokehole, I'm basically just making the exact thing right out of this book, Wood Stoves, How to Make and Use Them by Ole Wick. I hope I say that right. Anyway, this is a great book. It's by a guy who basically went up to Alaska and decided to do the I live in an Alaskan cabin thing, and he had to build his own stove without any training or anything, and he's got all kinds of designs and stuff. Very good book. It's out of print. You can find used copies. I also show how to make this collar in another one of my videos, and I'll link to it here. This has got some different dimensions. This is a 23.5 inch piece by 5 inches, and I'll show as I build a little bit here. This is the finished stokehole cover collar. Got it about as round as I can get it. And what I need to do next is make the plate for the front of the stove, the front of the stove, and then cut a hole to match the collar. And the reason you make the collar first is that it's easier to cut a hole to match your collar than it is to make a collar to match an existing hole. I cut the stoke hole. This is going to be the front panel of the stove. By the way, this is 22 gauge steel. This is 26 gauge steel because it's just easier for me to work with. I cut the stoke hole in the front panel of my stove, and then I mounted the stoke hole collar, and you can't push it, you can't pull it. It's bomb-proof, and it's also airtight. If you notice, it's all crimped around there, so no air is going to get in through here except what I intentionally let in with my draft can. So now I've constructed the stoke hole cover collar. This is the collar for the stoke hole cover, and it fits nice and snugly over the stoke hole collar. And I need to make the lid for this and get it ready. And then I'll have to cut my hole for my draft can and stuff in the lid before I start assembling all of this. And I show how to make this in another video. And for those of you that think I look like a cowboy, I think the high and tight even makes it a little bit more. So, kiss me goodbye. So I've got my stoke hole cover collar and my stoke hole cover plate. You can see on the collar I bent about a 1/4 inch out, and I made the plate about a 1/4 inch bigger than the outside diameter of this stoke hole cover collar, and then I'll crimp that over when it's time for final assembly here. But before I do that, I have to make, this is what I'm going to use for my draft can. And it'll go in here, and so I have to make a collar to support the draft can, and I'm going to get started on that here. Goodbye, my darling, hello, kind of collar for my draft can. I drew a circle about 1 inch up from the bottom of my stoke hole cover plate, and I need to cut a circular hole out of there and then set this in. Of all of the stuff, this is the hardest little sucker to make because the metal just, it's 26 gauge metal. I could probably find some thinner metal, but I just haven't bothered because I got a bunch of this 26 gauge around. But bending it to shape and everything is kind of hard. And the method to do this is, I've got it in another video, and it's also covered in that book that I showed earlier. So I just need to mount this to the plate, and then we'll mount the plate to the stoke hole cover, mount a handle, and we're done with the stoke hole cover. So I finished the stoke hole in the front plate here, the stoke hole collar, the stoke hole cover, all of that stuff, and then I've got my draft can here. You see, a little stubborn when you first get it, it loosens up, but I've got some air vents in there, and that's how you control the draft. And the good news is, once if it burns out or something, you just throw another can in there. Nice little handle. Now there's 3 things left to do really. I need to make a door for our oven here. I'm going to make it similar to this with a little collar and all that. And then I need to make my takeoff for my chimney here. And I think I'm going to make the door to the oven first. So I made the door for the oven. It just slides on and off. Just a square piece that fits the little thing there, and crimped over on top, and a little handle. Should be pretty nice to be able to bake in that. So now another thing to make is the top of the oven and the hole for the stovepipe, and also the collar for the stovepipe. So that I just took my stove, this is a 3-inch pipe. I may end up having to redo this depending on how well this drafts, but then I've got my, I need to cut a hole in there and then mount this. I show exactly how to do this in another video, so I'm not going to repeat it. Well, I have completed most of the construction on the oven. I've got my little chimney here and all that. Chimney will slip right down in there. It's a 3-inch chimney. And now I've got some, I guess you'd call this angle iron, but it's really steel. And I'm just going to make some legs for this sucker and bolt those on. And once that's done, we'll have a stove warming. And there it is. There's the finished stove. You know, made it from scratch. Out of sheet metal, you know, 22 gauge and 26 gauge sheet metal with rivets, all just hand tools. I did use a drill and a Dremel tool to slice off some of the rivets here and there, but everything else is like hammers, cold chisel, screwdriver, this sort of thing, just made with hand tools.